Let's continue our coverage of the so-called strategy session. And we've already determined that they're following in line with all the other transit districts in the country and making uh, austerity on the people able to afford it part of their issue. And in the case of TriMet, they're one of the least fair recovery ratios in the country. But yet they're putting forth this argument that without fares we can't operate. And if you have any knowledge of the way TriMet functions and its giant bureaucracy, you know that's not true. We know this isn't true. And the problem I have, of course, is that the elites of our country, and these people are the elites, are going in the exact wrong direction from where they should be going to help the people that need the help. They're doing the exact wrong thing. They're doing it openly. They're doing it in our face, and they have no shame. So we the people are under attack on multiple fronts. This is just one of many fronts where we're being squeezed to death. And the elites have no interest in what happens to us. And we see this play out even at TriMet, even at a place as small and little as TriMet, the little tiny kingdom of TriMet. It's even playing out here. They're going in the exact, they should be working towards fare free, but they're working in the other direction.
So when ridership declines and we have less fare revenue coming in or other funding altogether, we have to cover our operating costs by imposing those cost-cutting efforts. And I know that this is a slide that we've shared with you in the past, so I'm not going to go through.
See, this is made up, okay? This is made up. This is made up. There's loads of money, but it's not going to be used for you. And what's the Bastiat quote? Let me get the Bastiat quote for you. Bastiat quotes. Okay, let me see. He said it best. All right, here it is. When plunder becomes the way of life, men create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. Frederick Bastiat, I guess he's a Frenchman. This is exactly what's happening in our country. Plunder has become the way of life here, and all the laws are set to make plunder easy. And so here they are, all these executives are in fancy offices when they used to all be at Center Street. The bureaucracy has expanded to unbelievable. You should see all the positions they got there that don't really have any meaning. Okay, I've been looking at them a long time, and I see all kinds of positions that are really unnecessary. So they keep on expanding, but here they are trying to say that somehow if we don't get our fare, we're going to cut costs by imposing cost-cutting effort. So this is made up, folks. Okay, they're making it up.
The whole thing, but I do want to emphasize that when our resources dwindle, it has a direct effect on the amount of service that we get to provide on the street. It also causes us to pause on expanding our service. And those are two very critical components that really get hurt, which then affects our riders and our public. Advance. This next slide demonstrates how our operating costs compared to our passenger revenues and then our fare box recovery ratio. The blue bars demonstrate our operating costs through fiscal year 2010 through fiscal year 2022. The orange bars demonstrate the passenger revenue that we've collected, and the green line demonstrates our fare box recovery ratio. This slide demonstrates that starting in around 2015 through current, our operating costs have continued to rise.
It says unaudited financial data. At least they put that in there.
However, our passenger revenues have stayed steady.
Now, what do you mean your operating cost has risen? Because you got rid of all your benefits. I mean, what do you mean they've increased? You got rid of all the good stuff the drivers used to have. So why has it increased? Oh, maybe the gas, maybe? Is that what they're talking about?
And then, of course, with COVID.
I don't know how many of you remember gas prices spiked in like 2008. And McFarland, that criminal, did a fare increase back then, blaming gas prices. And then when the gas prices came down, of course, they didn't roll back the fares. They never do that.
Has dipped, and in fiscal year 2021, we experienced our lowest passenger revenue in the door during that time. Excuse me.
Along with all the other districts who took their COVID money and made sure they kept their services. But of course, now places like the MBTA, TriMet, can't find employees. Or maybe my theory is they don't want to find employees. I think they don't want to find employees. I don't even believe that they're honest about that. I think they're lying about that.
Just pause here and see if there's any questions.
Looking.
So the most they ever got on fareback, they say that in 2016 they had over 20% fare box recovery. I don't think these are right figures. I don't. I've been following this stuff from before fiscal year 2010, and I don't remember the fare box recoveries being over 20%. I just don't remember that. And here they're saying it was over 20% in 16, 17, and 18, and 19. That's not what I remember when I'm looking at the budgets.
To see if there are any questions. No, I think we can.
Oh. Okay. Just to highlight, the operating costs annual increase during this time was 4.2%, whereas our passenger revenue was only 2.3%. And back to the first slide, when we were talking about our policies, is that our fares were supposed to keep pace with the operating costs. And this clearly demonstrates that it has not. Even before COVID-19, our passenger revenues and the percentage of our fare box recovery was declining. Advance. This next slide just demonstrates what the fare box recovery ratio has been from fiscal year 2010.
They're saying it was, I don't believe this. I do not believe this. I was looking at budgets and I don't remember any of these figures. I do not remember these figures at all. I'm not going to go back and look again, but I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. They never had fare box recovery this high, so I don't know what, this is baloney, man. I'm calling you out on this. I think this is fake. I think this is fake data. I don't ever remember seeing it above 17%.
And through fiscal year 2022. As previously stated, you can see that starting in fiscal year 2015, our fare box recovery ratio has started to decline. But at one point, we were almost 40%.
I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I have to go all the way back to 2014 budget to look at that, but I don't believe that.
We're now currently, less than 20%. In fiscal year 2022, we were 13.3, and we experienced that all-time low in fiscal year 2021 of just under 10%. I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
Director Wade.
Thank you. Just a sort of a data question. So it's kind of interesting that, this is presented as a ratio, but I'm interested in what is the percentage of our fare revenue to our operating budget. I think
That's what this is.
That's what you're looking at.
So this is, are you saying 10% currently? Okay.
In 2021, it was less than 10%.
Okay. And so
And 20.
so then are we proposing it to go what percentage point?
We're not proposing that today.
Okay.
This is just information.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is this is showing that over time, the percentage that we collect through fares has gone down in relation to our operating
Yes,
budget.
we have not kept pace with the increase of our operating costs.
Okay, so I just wanted, just for the public, everybody who might be listening, so right now, it's 13% is how much we collect in fares.
We cover 13 point, at the end of fiscal year 2022, we were covering 13.2% through our passenger fares, where previously we were almost 40%.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
It's a combination of ridership and operating costs. Question. Thank you. So, if I understand these figures correctly, the 13.3% that we're going to recover in this year is 13.3% of the total system cost.
Of the operating costs.
Thank you. Okay. Then thank you for the math. Intuitively, it was looking closer like it was total operating. So I wanted to make sure, total system. So operations cost. This Fairbucks recovery is always factored against the total operations costs.
Yes.
So all of the community engagement funding, all of the things that are increasing total system costs are not affecting Fairbox recovery.
Correct.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for the clarification.
We can move on.
Great. Let's advance.
All right, well, I'm looking at the 2014 budget as we say it. They do claim that it was 25% of operating revenue in the budget, so I'm wrong. Passenger revenue is projected to increase. It's interesting, isn't it? It doesn't change my opinion. Okay, it's still it's not like MTA where half the funding has come from fares.
This next slide shows the total percentage change since fiscal year 2010. The orange bars again demonstrate the change in our overall operating costs. The yellow bars again reflect our passenger revenues. But what we've added in this display is that purple line shows you the percentage change in our base fares. So you can see that from fiscal year 10 through fiscal year 13, we had increases in our fares. But from fiscal year 14 through current, our fares have not increased, they've stayed static. And our costs are continuing to increase, where the overall fare revenue in the door, even pre-pandemic, have started to decrease. So I'll just pause and see if there's any additional.
Well, they're making a case for raising the fares at the worst possible time in the history of the service. Okay, at the worst possible time, they're worrying about this. And I'm going to say it again. There's plenty of money for pork barrels. It's unrestricted. Plenty of money for bureaucracy. It's unrestricted. But when it comes to this, there's no money. All right, so wake up, okay? You're being scammed here. This is a scam presentation. This is not true. There's plenty of money. Look at all the money they just shipped over to Ukraine. But you don't get, it all goes there. There's plenty of money. You just don't get it. They want you to pay for everything.
Additional questions?
Director Gonzalez? No. I don't see anyone with a question.
Advance. We took the time to measure ourselves against data found in the National Transit database. We looked at 24 peer agencies. We found that San Diego Transit has the highest fare box recovery ratio. The lowest of that is Santa Clara Valley, and that's in your orange line. The average of those 24 agencies are demonstrated in the red line, and the green dotted line is TriMet.
Well, then what's the problem? What's the problem? TriMet's higher than the average. So what's the problem? This is TriMet. This is the low. This is the average, and this is TriMet. So they're doing the same as 24. They're doing better than most of the other agencies, in other words.
So that you can see that overall we all have, in a sense, the same slope. TriMet is similar to other transit entities.
You're better than other entities.
And no,
You're not. You're better. Okay, you're just under San Diego, which is the highest. So what's the fucking problem here?
that this is not 2010, but 2015 to 2020 data. So that shows us at our highest and dropping down. It doesn't go to 22. Director Gonzalez.
Thank you. And if we were to chase this out into 22, it looks like our slope would dip below the average.
Yes, and keep in mind the NTD data is always 2 years behind. So this is the most up-to-date data that I can view compared to those other 24 entities.
Thank you.
Okay, advance. We took a subset of those 24. And so what you see on the screen now is just demonstrating that TriMet, our average, our fare box recovery compared to the average of 20.6, just for a select number of peer transit entities.
So what? I'm not, again, where's the problem? You mean now there's a problem? Well, everybody's having a problem because nobody's riding anymore. Why aren't they riding? Well, your service sucks.
This is for that same period of 2015 to 2020.
They never had a 31% fare box recovery. They never had that much. Okay, I was just looking at the budget. And it was 20, what did they say, 24% in 2014?
Advance. We also wanted to just compare this to what else is happening, to all of us in the area. So when you look at our adult-based fare from fiscal year 2010 to fiscal year 2021, we've had a 0.7% increase in fares. But even Social Security COLA has more than doubled that increase there, an increase of 1.
So what is she arguing here? She's arguing, see, they're showing you how they're squeezing the shit out of us. Okay, Social Security hardly went up at all in a decade. That's like nothing. And she's using this as an argument to raise fares? My God, this is bad. This is really bad, folks.
1.9. Your electricity has increased 2.6, and Portland Water has increased 8.7% in the same period of time. Advance. So this slide's going to take me just a minute to explain everything that is on here. But this is
Orange County 0.5%. Shit, they do more recovery than MARTA even? Miami? I thought those places, I can't believe it, man. TriMet does better than all of those. Even DART.
This is a very important slide to help you understand how TriMet compares to other transit entities and our resource base. And that first column is fares. This is passenger fares. On average, transit entities collect 9.5% of their funding through fares, where TriMet is 15.5%. There's other operating revenue that transit entities collect. On average, it's 5.8%, where TriMet is 7%. When I say other operating revenue, it's things like advertising on our buses. Okay, so we get our advertising revenue. That third column represents taxes and fees. This is where our employer payroll tax revenue resides. The average is 41.4, TriMet is 39.8, and from our comparables, there are 3 total entities that rely heavily on a employer type tax. The next column, titled local, is that a lot of entities receive their funding from local sources, so it's local taxes imposed on taxpayers. The average there is 26.3%, where TriMet is only 0.2%. Okay, we get very little funding from local resources. The next one over is our state resources. This is where the state is funding these transit entities. The average is 20.8, where TriMet is 1.9%. Our 1.9% represented here is that STIF funding, the House Bill 2017 funding.
So why is the state of Oregon not paying anything when these other states are? Look at Pittsburgh, 58%. Orange County, 64%. I thought federal couldn't fund operations, but here's a graph that says they are funding operations. She just said previously that the feds don't fund operational costs, but here you can see it right here. She's got 35.6.
And then, of course, we all get that federal funding, which is, the average is 32%. TriMet relies on 35.6%. This is our formula funding. I want to emphasize that. This is what we get every year because we report our ridership and our operating costs through the NTD. We get a formula. It comes to us. We don't have to compete for it.
All right. Well, I didn't know that. She just said previously that the federal government does not pay for operations, but they do.
You can see in the green stars, our three main sources of revenue is our passenger fares, our employer payroll tax, and federal funding. Whereas other entities rely on three different sources. They rely on local funding, state funding, and then, of course, the federal funding. So the one thing we have in common is we all rely on federal funding. But this is an important concept to look at. So in some ways, TriMet has an advantage that one of our main sources is actually our employer payroll taxes. Because when you get into local and state funding and you start relying on that, when the state or local entities experience cuts and downturns, you in turn take that downturn. And we were fortunate that during COVID, our employer payroll taxes has remained strong. It's been steady.
Yeah, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Because the lockdowns didn't actually affect the employer tax. That doesn't make sense.
So I'll just pause here and see what questions there might be.
Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, President Simmons. I've heard that there is a relationship between our competitiveness on formula funds and our fare box recovery rates. Mm-hmm. Could you speak a little bit on where we stand or what the trend is saying about our competitiveness, how it might impact formula funds? Do you think that we're in a position where that's going to be impacted as well?
Mm-hmm. So the question about is a fare box recovery required? So no, it is not required. Does it help us be more competitive when we are requesting additional funding? Yes, absolutely. Because what outside parties look at is they say, what are you doing? Okay, what are you doing to cover your own costs? You are providing a service. You are a governmental entity that provides a service to the public. There should be a user charge and fee. It's never going to cover the full cost. Okay?
And that's not the way it is around the world. There's plenty of places around the world that have fare-free transit systems. None of them are large, okay, except for over there in Estonia, Tallinn, I guess. All of them are smaller cities, but they're doing it.
It would be very expensive for us to turn around and ask someone to pay the full meal deal for a ride. We're highly subsidized. However, the fact that we have passenger fares is a good indicator that when they're giving us money, that we are looking at those opportunities to do everything that we can to have a revenue base that is fair and evenly applied. It is also important to understand that the passenger fares has a huge impact on our ability to issue debt. We have three main categories of funding that are very diverse. When you look at the other entities where they get local funding, state funding, and federal funding, it's all kind of the same category, the same type of bucket. But TriMet is diverse in that we do get passenger revenues. We have an employer payroll tax, and we get federal funding. that is more diverse than what the other transit entities are relying on. That is part of the reason why we have been so successful when we have gone out to issue bonds. If you remove that element, you have cut our diversity by a third. That will have a significant impact in our ability to issue bonds, and it will significantly impact our ability to maintain a AAA rating.
I don't get it.
Director Kim.
I don't get it. And why are the bonds? See, here we go with the financial system again being part of our. I mean, what the fuck is the bond rating companies doing involved with public transportation in the first place? And I'll tell you, because it's a crime syndicate. Everything emanates from the banksters. The money, the banksters, it's all part of the same scheme.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm curious about the I've noticed the transit agencies listed on page 14 has such high level of local funding, right? And would you be able to comment on how they're able to receive such high level of funding from their own local jurisdictions? Would you know?
What's the source?
That's how they were structured. Within those entities, it's the way they've imposed their taxes on their citizens to support the transit services.
So then in turn, the columns, taxes and fees column, as well as the local column, would be, it sounds similar to me that it's sort of taxes, but in the taxes and fees that we're categorizing, it's employer portion. So it's just what?
Yeah, the taxes and fees, that's a TriMet. That's a TriMet tax versus the local and state. Those are local and state taxes, of which the transit entities get some portion of the local and state taxes.
Yeah, see, TriMet has a dedicated tax, whereas like New York, you hear Cuomo defunds it. The governor of New York controls the MTA budget. So when he wants to cut it, he just does it. He can't do that here in Portland because they have a dedicated tax that goes to transit, okay, or goes to TriMet. I don't know if TriMet uses that money for more than just service, though. The executive ghouls make the decisions where that money's going to go.
Is that like sales tax in some cases?
In some cases.
Okay, thank you.
Director Way.
See, they don't even know that. They don't even understand. These board members don't understand any of this.
Thank you. So my understanding is that the taxes and fees, these are all under TriMet's authority, correct? As a government agency in our statute to consider, to look at formulas, to change. Is that correct? We have the authority. We have the power to dictate that. Okay.
By statute, you have the authority, yes.
And then how often I'm 5 years into this board, I still have a lot of questions around how often that changes.
You could talk about...
And notice how they never talk about debt service. Debt service, that's money coming out of our taxes to pay the banks for interest on loans the banks made for the goddamn expansions. That's a real... They don't talk about that, okay? Last time I looked, debt service was almost as much as the goddamn fares, okay? And I've always said that the debt service should have never been part of the equation. This is how the banking system steals money from the taxpayers by issuing debt. There's so many scams involved here, it's hard to even keep track of them. The purpose of government is crime, and it's playing out right in front of you here. Their purpose is to steal as much money as they can from the taxpayers. Now, in the case of TriMet, their service is very marginal, very unreliable. I wouldn't pay for it. They shouldn't be asking people to pay for it right now until they get it together.
The employer, where we have 0.1% through 2026, that was actually approved by the legislature.
Sorry, I didn't.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just the
okay, yes.
When is that?
Yeah, so the employer payroll tax is 0.1%, starting in January of every year. Our increment right now will stop at the end, January of 2026.
Okay. And then my just comment is, I love the way that this table is organized, so thank you. It just makes it very clear in terms of what other transit agencies are doing, but I'm not seeing, what I would like to see are also their ridership numbers, because I would be because at the end of the day, I think about how many people are we serving on our system. So I think that would be good information to have. It seems like right now we're not doing great. We're 15.5%, which is maybe the fourth highest in terms of fare revenue, but our ridership has also been decreasing. So that is a concern to me.
Yeah, and something I'll mention, because it's there, but it could be not as evident, is this is only 1 year data, 2020. So it's not a span of years data.
Correct.
It's a snapshot.
Correct. But layering our ridership, it has been going down.
Yes. One of the things I'd like to point out here is that for a real good comparable, look one line below Portland. You see Metro Atlanta Rapid Transit. You'll notice that they have fares, and they are running at the same fare box recovery, 15.5. They also have like a comparable employer type of tax. Theirs is running at 42.5. And then their third bucket, just like TriMet, is the federal funding. So they're a very good comparable to us, looking at what we do. They have a little bit more in that other operating revenue than what TriMet does, but they're a real good comparable. Specifically focusing on their fare box recovery is right in line with what TriMet's is.
And you know what their fare?
No, go ahead. JC has been waiting to say something.
Sorry, I just wanted to follow up with Director, Director Kim's comment. A lot of agencies have been very successful with sales tax, and so that's what you're seeing, a big portion. But I want to connect two dots in that Nancy said that a lot of times where people, sales tax follows economy, and so when you see economies start to dip, the transit service will take a dip because sales tax takes a dip. And so we're very lucky to have the employer payroll tax. So just wanted to follow up with that.
Ozzy? Oh, I'm sorry, Ozzy. I'm sorry, Ozzy. I neglected to see. I see hands around here. You need to put it over here. Director Baumann.
Okay. We got kind of a pantomime going.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the TriMet payroll tax. The employer side tax. I guess I wanted to clarify for everyone. It is levied by TriMet, but the amount is set by legislation. Is that correct? So by the state legislature. So the board doesn't decide what percentage.
The board decides.
Yeah, and let's remember, okay, the percent of fares to the total TriMet budget. TriMet budget is 1.9 billion. It barely went down at all in the height of the pandemic, and now it's back up. So the fares are less than 7% of the operating budget. All right, let's not forget that. That's important to understand. They're trying to say, well, it's 20% of our operational budget, which may be true, but it's nothing compared to the overall budget. And it's another example of, they've set up a system of corruption where they have these funding sources by law can only be spent on pork barrels. They set up, that's that Bastiat quote. They've created a system of plunder and a moral code to justify it. And everybody here goes along with it because we're a sheep. We're a country of sheep. We don't think. We just believe what we're told.
The board goes through a lot of action to get that percentage, but ultimately it's approved by the legislature. And so while the increase ends in 2026, it still maintains. A lot of people, there's a misnomer out there that our payroll tax stops in 2026. It continues to go at the level that it ends at that last increase.
Right. When I was new on the board, these increases were implemented. There was a multi-year increase at that time.
And we're still in that increase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're still increasing.
1/10 to 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Director Gonzalez.
And Do we know what MARTA's fare is today, standard fare?
I believe that we have that in our back pocket somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, we'll look that up and
Thank you.
shout that out.
Yeah, I intentionally did not include other agency fares because that's not what we're talking about today. It's really about the role passenger fares serves in.
All right, MARTA fares as of today. Cash fare $2.50, paid at the bus. Breeze card $2. Breeze ticket $1. Single trip $2.50. Round trip $5. 10 trips $25. 20 trips $40. A 1-day pass is $9. A 2-day pass is $14. TriMet does have the best day pass in the country, in my opinion. Elderly fare is $1. 30-day pass is $95. TriMet is $100. 7-day pass $23. TriMet doesn't have that anymore. 4-day pass $19. TriMet doesn't have any of these other passes anymore. So they have a much different system.
In the fiscal health of the agency, Director Vanetta.
This just in, the MARTA fare is $2.50 for a one-way trip. So, absolutely. One way. So ours is for 2.5 hours. Theirs is a one-way trip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm sure they can't enforce that either. You get $2.50. You can get multiple transfers if you want. But people generally just go. Well, it depends on where you live and where you're going.
If there are no more questions on this slide, we'll advance.
Daily parking. They don't charge. You see, people that would drive to the parking lots don't have to pay to park.
Okay. Advance. When we looked at how other transit agencies, what they use to, in deciding to raise a fare, what we found is that it's either generated through state legislation, a policy, or a guideline. In some instances, there is a subsidy requirement stating that, at least or no more than. So this is just a, very, very high level view of what that looks like. Advance. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, could you walk through that a little bit? Because who requires that subsidy? Is that at the legislative level?
That would be in their charters and how they
in their
perform.
strategic financial plan. They require that fare, for example, and whatever RTD is 30%. So they want to make sure that fare box is 30%.
Not the fare box, the percentage of...
Oh, by the way, the MARTA Breeze card, which would be similar to the Hop card, is $2. So it's actually it's cheaper to ride MARTA. Just telling you that Vanetta only told you the cash one-way fare. You have that Breeze card, you can go, it's $2. TriMet doesn't have any discounts for Hop card versus cash.
Of subsidy. So you're going to have your fare box recovery, and then you're going to have a subsidy portion. Okay. So when you look at TriMet, for right now, a ride is covered 14% from passenger fares.
Right.
And 86% from, other sources or subsidies.
Which means that's the subsidy. So our fare, our $2.50 fare, the passenger pays 14%, and other sources pay the balance.
Well, yeah, duh. Are you paying attention or not?
The cost of the ride.
Yeah, when you look at the cost of a ride, the passenger fare that's paid covers 14% of the ride.
Okay. And what this is saying is RTD would want it to be 70% passenger fare, 30% subsidy?
No, it's not what, that's not what it's saying.
Okay.
What it's saying is
They removed the subsidy. See, removed.
that there's a subsidy, and I would just take off the word required. We probably shouldn't have titled it that way.
Yeah, see, they titled it. See how they've created this whole presentation to support an agenda that they want. Okay, it's not objective. It's what these TriMet technocrats want.
It's looking at what is the percentage of subsidy that is going into each of those entities. In a sense,
It's not based on a ride.
correct.
It's based on their overall costs.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, advance. Okay, this last slide has to do with fair evasion, and I'm going to turn it over to JC to address this.
Yeah, and so we've done this work. This is from our last report that was done in 2019. We actually do a fair evasion survey. And so this data is from 2019, so please, I apologize for that, but we did postpone all of our fair evasion surveys during COVID. Obviously, we did not want to go on board our buses and trains.
Don't you have that data from the operators who are pushing fair evasion? Don't you have that data from the fair evasion button? What do you mean you're doing surveys? You have that data. It's called fair evasion button.
To perform the survey. But in the last survey, our fair evasion rate was around 18.2%. You'll see on the right-hand side how we compare to our other peers. I would note that we are an open system, so much like SFMTA in San Francisco, Valley Metro in Phoenix, King County, we're an open system. So but you'll also see some of our statistics. And again, we are looking at doing this fair evasion survey hopefully next spring. So we'll have some new numbers next year. 80% of riders were in fair compliance. We did reach that all-time high of fair evasion.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. Look, of the riders surveyed, 2% said they could not afford it. 62% said they did not tap, forgot to tap, or took a chance. That's bullshit. We already know that transit-dependent riders are the lowest economic strata of society, or they wouldn't be on the bus. So that's bullshit.
3% had the wrong fare. Other riders said they could not afford it. 62% said they didn't tap because they thought they would take a chance. So we actually do go out and gather this information. A quick little note that 1% of fair evasion equals roughly about $1 million in loss. So that's how we address fair evasion. Again, we will do another survey next spring to give us some updated numbers.
You know, I want to remind everybody that public transportation in this country used to be privately owned. 0 operating subsidies by taxpayers. And now they have these giant bureaucracies that need taxpayer subsidies. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that there's a lot of things here that I have a lot of problems with, you know. As I said earlier, they should be going towards a fare free. Instead, they're going in the wrong. They're going in the 180 degrees in the other direction. They're going to squeeze you more rather than squeeze you less. And it's unconscionable. It's unconscionable. And these people are psychopaths. They have no empathy for the people that have to pay for this. They're sociopaths most likely. I know Linda Simmons is a sociopath, and I know that Bauman is because I've heard some of their comments in the past regarding this. You know, they're talking like elites. You know, people should do what I do and what I say.
Director Bauman. Oh, you said some of the other systems are open systems, but can you tell us which ones are open and which
ones are? LA Metro is closed, TriMet's open, San Francisco is open, Valley Metro, Phoenix is open, King County is open, DDOT, I'm not sure. Detroit.
Oh, that's Detroit.
It's closed.
closed. Sacramento is open, RTD is open, MBTA is closed, VTA is open, MARTA is closed. Meaning closed means they have fare gates where you have to pay a fare to get on board trains. Buses are much like ours.
Director Kim?
How did we find those participants again? There's 10,000 participants, the riders.
Yeah.
Were they actually
Good question, Kim.
physically on one of our...
Yes, and in fact, what we do is we essentially shadow our fare inspectors, and there are some, we will ask them questions, and they go through an entire survey, and we just ask them to be very honest, and that's how we get the information. So, and we use it to sync up with how we addressed fare evasion overall, and that's where we've actually gotten some of our equity studies done. Is we've gone out there and actually followed our fare inspectors to see how they perform.
Yeah, you don't your equity.
Thank you.
Before I go to Director Way, I don't know if, Andrew, you have any information on what we have done to increase the amount of fare inspection.
Am I-
We have increased our fare enforcement team. I think I shared that in August, from 18 to 37.
Yeah, okay, I've had enough of this for today, but before I go, I want to look at some of this stuff that I tweeted earlier because it's relevant to this discussion. Let me find it for you. I do so many tweets during the day because Twitter is part of my entertainment package, and I actually tweet a shitload of stuff. Okay, here it is. See, this is what they're doing at WMATA. See, their mainstream media is making this case. They're trying to turn the citizens against each other, as they do. Okay, they're making them the enemy, trying to insinuate that they are those aren't very good fare gates, are they? Okay, so they're showing you all these people taking advantage. Okay, look at they got the average annual cost of street crime is $15 billion per year, but nearly $1 trillion for white collar. They got ratioed on this. It's like, why are you looking at this when we have all this other major criminal activity going on in this country? Is the most corrupt and powerful city in the world, and this is what you think is most alarming? You proud of this segment when the city is paying out settlements to the tune of $67 million for cops for shooting civilians and beating people? You're focusing on this? Seems like more propaganda from journalists. Public transportation should be free for all riders. A tale of two crime raves in Eric Adams, New York. If you can't afford the subway or shoplift diapers, you are hunted as a criminal. If you own property and violate building codes that kill people in fires is treated as civil matter. Our camera isn't hidden, and people are still doing it to tell you. You're deploying your camera as a policing device. Anyway, shouldn't you be taking a video of Wall Street crooks who push to privatize the metro and evade taxes rather than powerless people who can't afford fare increases? I mean, it goes on and on. The public is against all of this. Okay, this is the point. We're against what you're doing, TriMet, and we know you're pieces of shit for pushing this. Okay, and we don't have any power over you. And the people themselves are brain dead. But what you're doing is wrong, and we know it. You're hurting the most vulnerable people in the Portland metro area, and you have the nerve to talk about equity. You know, you're just plain hypocrites and liars.